Well, hey there, Anchor Point. Want to welcome you back to our study on the book of Ephesians, Paul's letter to the Ephesians. And as you've probably gathered now in your group and settled to not only watch this, but really dive into the scriptures, there's a couple preliminary things that I want to share with you. Anytime you start a group or get things going again, sometimes there's always like an awkward, like, how's this going to work? And I just want to encourage you all to relax. You're among friends who love God and really do want to grow in their relationship with Him. And you have the privilege of doing that together in your group over the next number of weeks as we continue exploring Paul's letter to Ephesians. So on Sunday, preached on chapter 3, verses 1 to 13. And before I did that, we did a brief review of where Paul has taken us in the first two chapters, that we've been blessed with everything in Christ. God hasn't withheld anything. He prays that we know this. He reminds us of who we once were and now who we are because of God who made us alive, and that's only by His grace. And then from there, he begins to talk about how there's no more divisions, the dividing wall between Jew, Gentile, between every group of people in Christ through faith in Him is gone, and he's encouraging, know this, live into this. And then in chapter 3, our text, he begins by saying, I, Paul, am a prisoner of Christ for you, Ephesians, Gentiles. The Gentiles, as you know, were considered to be outsiders among God's people. Like, they were the nobodies. They were the ones who did not have the covenant, didn't have the promises, didn't have the law of God. They didn't have anything related to God whatsoever. And Paul says, I am in prison, literally he's in prison in Rome, for your sake. Because I'm preaching the gospel that all who believe in Christ, regardless of their color, regardless of their class, regardless of their cultural background, have free access to the Father through Jesus Christ. And he really wants these Ephesians to know this. And so he says, I'm a prisoner for your sake, for the sake of this. And then at the end of this section, in verse 13, he tells the Ephesians, I really want you not to worry about me and the suffering that I have to undergo for you by being in jail for this gospel. And in between verse 1 to 13 is how Paul explains why that is. He begins with the grace of God. He says, the grace of God was given to me. And that is with respect to his salvation. He's saved. He himself has been made alive. But Paul has the mentality that his salvation, his being born again, his being a child of God, a Christian, is not about him and him alone, but it exists also for others. There's a plan behind God's grace for Paul. And the same is true for you and me. The grace that we've been given as Christians to believe and to be children of God, regardless of our background. Yes, we benefit from it. We have all of these blessings in Christ, but it is for others as well. I want you to know that and believe that and live into that and talk about that tonight. And Paul then goes on to talk about how the mystery of God, the mystery of Christ, was kept hidden in God for ages and ages and ages. That is referring to God's Old Testament people. In the Old Testament, there were clues about who the Messiah was going to be. But the full mystery was not yet known until Christ comes. And then he reveals by the Spirit who he is to the disciples, the original 12, the apostles, the prophets, and then Paul says to he himself as well. The mystery of Christ is that Gentiles are heirs of the gospel, heirs of Christ and all the inheritance, that they are of the same body and that they have a future inheritance waiting for them. They have all the blessings because of their faith in Christ. Christ has made that possible for them. The mystery is now known. And what's more about this mystery is that through it, that is now revealed through the gospel, Paul says, I've been made a minister of the gospel, of this news, for all of you Gentiles to know. That it doesn't matter, again, of your color, your class, your cultural background. You are in Christ. He's made that way possible. And that is so that the church, Jew, Gentile, regardless of background, one in Christ, might put on display as in a theater before the angels in heaven and all of the angelic beings who are observing this in the heavenlies, saying, this is amazing. They are longing to look into this. And we as the church are a part of teaching angels, showing angels the manifold wisdom of God in our salvation, that there is no more dividing wall between Jew and Gentile. We're all one in Christ. And so Paul then simply says, don't worry about me. Like, this is worth it. This is for your benefit. Get your eyes off of my suffering and put it on the right thing, all that you have in Christ, and that there is truly no dividing wall anymore between classes of people. That when people come to Christ, we are all one. I hope you know that when you look at people, whether it's in our church or other believers, we must look at Christ, look at them through the lens of Christ first and who they are in Christ before we look at them based on their color, class, or culture. I hope you have enjoyed your time together as you now dive into these truths, follow the questions, and God bless you all. Love you all. Have a great time.